Astronomy in Reverse by Pansley. Chapter 8. Sick. When Bucky arrives back home, he finds Peter groaning on the love seat, a frozen bag of tater tots lodged beneath his shirt against his ribs. Peter looks up at him when he enters, his expression guarded and worried, and presses the bag harder against his side, which is undoubtedly bruised from where the bus pinned him. Seeing the kid in pain only derails Bucky for a second before he feels the same swell of anger from before rear its ugly head with a vengeance. He doesn't mask the displeased frown on his face as he approaches the love seat.
"What the hell were you thinking?"
Peter looks up at him, eyes widening slightly at Bucky's livid tone, and opens his mouth to reply, but Bucky cuts him off before he can.
"I'm not angry at you for helping those people, but hell, kid, we need to work on your gut reactions if the best idea you had was to jump in front of a moving bus like that. Did you even think before you almost got yourself killed? You did it, did you?"
"I did," Peter protests, moving to sit up slightly, then wincing from the pain in his ribs and sliding back down again. "I did think about it. My webs wouldn't have been strong enough to stop it in time. There was no other choice. I thought that even if I couldn't catch it, maybe I could slow it down enough so that nobody got hurt."
"Except you." Bucky hisses, the anger bubbling up once again. "You're damn lucky that you walked away from that with only a couple of bruised ribs, you reckless little fool."
"I'm sorry," Peter says, looking apologetic, but also determined, his expression hardening slightly. For worrying you, but I'm not sorry I stopped the bus."
"By jumping in front of it."
"But I stopped it!" Bucky lifts a hand to his temple and starts gently massaging it to stem the budding headache he could feel coming on. He sighs in frustration, trying to remain reasonable in the face of his anger and fear.
"You did, and I'm proud of you for that," he says, deceptively calm. "But this careless attitude has got to stop, Peter. I can't handle it. You have to promise me no more throwing yourself in front of buses, no more following random strangers into empty alleys, no more confronting criminals carrying guns. It stops right now, you hear me? Or Spider-Man won't be patrolling on his own anymore."
"What?" Peter Bog's face reddening slightly at the idea. You're gonna follow me around while I patrol?"
"If that's the only way I can stop you from doing stupid crap, yeah, you better believe I will,"
he says as he sits beside the kid on the love seat, deeply sighing to try and quell his nerves, the irritation still coursing through him.
"Peter, come on. If you won't do it for yourself, do it for me. I'm starting to feel my age from how worried I am about you all the time."
"I'm sorry," Peter says again, softer now, and Bucky turns and sees the genuinely regretful look in the boy's eyes, in his slumped shoulders. "I hate making you worry. It's just, when I saw those people in that car about to be hit, all I could think was, they need my help. If I don't do something, they'll get hurt. I couldn't let that happen."
"What about me, huh?"
Bucky asks, poking the kid in his other side, the unbruised one, making him giggle and squirm at the ticklish feeling.
"If I have to sit and watch you almost get killed one more time, kid, I swear I'm gonna go blind from the stress."
Stop tickling me!" Peter begs, laughing until his eyes are wet, clutching his bag of tater tots desperately. "Ow, ow, ow, my ribs!"
"Seriously, Peter, promise me,"
Bucky implores, moving his hand up to the boy's shoulder.
"Promise me you'll be more careful. I don't know what I would do if something happened to you."
Peter nods shyly, then gives him a sheepish smile. "Okay, I promise." Bucky smiles back and pats the kid's shoulder, then releases a long, tired breath, leaning back into the sofa and allowing the tension to leave his body. Peter is quiet for a long moment, then hesitantly asks, "What are we going to do about the videos?" The tension resurfaces in an instant. Bucky frowns down at his lap, keeps his gaze averted as he says,
"I think it's time we came up with an escape plan, kiddo."
He watches Peter lower his gaze to the floor from the corner of his eye, the boy giving a solemn nod. Bucky waits to see if he'll say anything in response, but he stays quiet, lost in thought. He doesn't blame him. The situation looks bleak. Realistically, the only people who actually know Bucky and Peter and could identify Bucky from those videos are Frank and his wife, Ned, and maybe old man Delmar. He highly doubts that anyone from Peter's award ceremony got a good enough look at him to remember his face, so that just leaves Steve and Hydra, hence the need for an escape plan.
"We're going to assemble you a bug-out bag, okay?"
Bucky says, turning to look at Peter.
"And then start preparing to leave at a moment's notice. I don't think there's any need to jump the gun and skip down right away. Maybe we'll get lucky and nothing will come of it." But we shouldn't risk it. Let's make arrangements now, just in case. So if worst comes to worst, we're ready.
Okay, Peter says.
And,
Bucky adds hesitantly,
in the meantime, kid, you should be a little more discreet when you're out as Spider-Man. Change up your outfit, stick close to the ground, that sort of thing. We can't afford to draw attention to ourselves right now.
Peter frowns, his brows furrowing unhappily. For how long?
Until this all blows over.
Bucky says.
Or if we're discovered, then maybe forever.
A somewhat crushed look crosses Peter's face, and he folds in on himself, smooshing the tater tots against his side. Bucky regards him quietly, his heart sinking in the boy's depressed expression.
I'm sorry, kid,
he says, exhaling.
This is my fault. I shouldn't have blown your cover like that.
No, it's okay, Peter says, quickly maneuvering himself so he can lean against Bucky on the uninjured side of his ribs. No matter where we are, I can still help people, even if it's not Spider-Man, so it's okay if that has to change. I don't care about not being Spider-Man if it means I get to stay with you. Bucky runs his hand through the boy's hair, letting him sag deeper against his side with a tired, slightly pained groan, which has Bucky looking down at the wet bag of processed potatoes draped across Peter's side.
Okay,
he says with another pat to the kid's head.
Now let's take a look at those bruises.
Later in the summer, on a warm, rainy morning, Bucky wakes as he usually does, early, hours before Peter even begins to stir, and goes about his own morning routine, which mostly involves mentally dragging himself back to the world of the living. It's an average morning at first. Even though it's warm outside, the downpour of rain makes their apartment feel cooler as Bucky starts preparing breakfast, not too concerned with being quiet, since it's time for Peter to wake up anyway. Peter likes to sleep in whenever he can, but on days that he needs to be up early for school or, like today, for work, he's usually pretty good about getting himself off the love seat and into the shower without Bucky having to badger him much. But not today, apparently. Even with all the noise Bucky doesn't hesitate to make as he cooks, Peter doesn't so much as twitch. He pays no mind to the sleeping boy on the other side of the kitchen's small island counter for as long as he can, but when breakfast is made and the smell of freshly cooked eggs and bacon still hasn't roused Peter in the slightest, Bucky can't deny the inkling of worry that settles in his stomach. He pushes it down until he's done plating up their meal. Even if Peter is completely exhausted, Bucky knows he won't say no to a hot breakfast. The kid is always hungry. He's never once turned down food in all the time Bucky's known him.
Good,
Bucky says, not trying to be overly loud nor overly quiet, as he gently shakes the boy's shoulder, wrapped head to toe in his thick, puffy sleeping bag.
Kid, hey, Peter, it's time to wake up. You have work in a few hours.
The boy doesn't even move. Bucky can barely see the top of Peter's head, just a few tufts of hair sticking out of the mouth of his sleeping bag, but he can still tell that the kid is lying utterly still, almost unnaturally so. Frowning, he nudges him again, saying a little louder,
Come on, Peter, up you get. Breakfast is getting cold.
But he still doesn't move, not even a groan. Bucky feels something like a sharp tack pierce the inside of his chest, his hands moving a little too fast, a little too rough, as he sharply pulls back the sleeping bag.
Hey.
The words cut off as they leave his mouth, his mind going blank as he sees Peter's face, as his hand makes contact with the boy's bare arm. Alarm! Blazes inside of Bucky, his fingers trembling as he tries once more to shake the boy back to consciousness.
Peter, wake up. You have to wake up.
His hand recoils instinctively when he touches the boy's red, flushed face. He's hot. He's way too hot. His skin feels like Bucky just touched a lit element. Peter's eyes are clenched shut, his forehead and cheeks gleaming with sweat, his brows furrowed as if in pain. Nightmare? Bucky wonders at first, but no, that wouldn't be enough to cause a fever like this. Swallowing thickly, Bucky presses his palm to the boy's face again, cupping it, confirming to himself that he really is that unnaturally warm, literally burning up.
Peter.
Bucky tries peeling the sleeping bag away from the kid's body.
Hey, kid, you feel pretty warm. Wake up, let me look at you.
When he pulls the bag down to the kid's waist, Peter is painfully in his sleep, curling in on himself and wrapping his arms around his chest, suppressing a light shiver. Bucky gently tries to pull his arms open, kneeling down beside the couch so he can get a closer look at the boy, as if he could physically see what's causing his fever.
Kid, come on, don't curl up like that. You're already way too hot.
He pleads, but Peter whines, voice laden with ache and weariness, trying to hug himself again as Bucky pulls his hands away. Peter's eyes slowly blink open, hazy and unfocused, obscured by his damp bangs. He looks straight ahead at Bucky, but doesn't seem to see him, his face twisting in pain as he sags pitifully into the couch. "Bucky?" he hoarsely whispers. Bucky's heart drops down into his stomach at the sound of Peter's voice. He sounds nothing like him. "Cold!" the boy moans, still trying to pull his hands free.
"You just feel cold, kiddo,"
he says softly, letting the boy have one of his hands back so that he can lean down and brush the wet bangs out of Peter's face, smoothing them back.
"You're burning up. If you get any hotter, you'll cook your brain."
Peter tiredly shakes his head, then lays it against the love seat's armrest, his eyes slipping closed again. "Please, so cold."
"Can you eat something?"
Bucky tries, not knowing what else to do but keep the boy's wet hair out of his eyes.
"Maybe some hot breakfast will warm you up. We still have painkillers from the bus incident. That might bring your fever down. What do you say? We still have some orange juice, too. That sounds good, yeah?"
But Peter doesn't say anything, and his pained breathing evens out slowly until he's unnaturally still and silent again. Sighing, Bucky sits up and gives the kid a quick once-over. His face is red, but beneath that his complexion is almost freakishly pale. His arms are stark white against the navy color of his sleeping bag, so light that every single blue vein is visible. Bucky's breath nearly stops at the sight of it. It's then he realizes that something is seriously wrong with Peter. The first thing he does is call Delmar to tell him that Peter is too sick to come in today. The man is agreeable and sympathetic, giving Bucky a sincere-sounding, "Go take care of that boy and tell him to call me when he is feeling better, and then I can put him back on the schedule, yes?" before they say goodbye. The second thing he does is call Frank, though Sharon is the one who picks up. "Jim, darling," she asks when she hears his voice. "Now, what are you calling here for? Are you not coming in today?"
"Sorry, no,
He swallows again, trying to get a handle on the shaky, watery sound of his voice.
I can't. My kid he's sick. He's really sick. He needs me."
The woman gasps quietly, her tone turning a lot less curious and a lot more kind. "Oh, Jim, oh no, the poor thing, what's wrong with him?"
"I don't know yet,"
Bucky says helplessly, sitting again beside the love seat so he can feel Peter's still much too high temperature.
"He's burning up. He's really hot, and he can't stay awake."
"How high is his fever?" Sharon asks, much calmer than Bucky sounds at the moment. He frowns, trying to get a good range of the temperature through his metal hand, but it's too hard to pinpoint.
"I don't have a thermometer."
He admits feeling a stab of shame at admitting that to the woman, what she must think of him.
This has never happened before."
"He's never gotten sick before?" she asks, the surprise evident in her warm voice. Bucky ducks his head, scrambling to come up with an excuse, a lie, something that wards off suspicion.
"Not since I've had him,"
Bucky says, and there's real genuine guilt in his voice, though he doesn't know why, but at least it will help convince Sharon.
"I wasn't around when he was younger."
"Oh, Jim!" Bucky grits his teeth. There's pity in her voice, but he knows it's not for him. It's for Peter, the son she thinks he walked out on or left. The deadbeat dad is only just now figuring this out, 15 years too late, helpless, when he should be an expert. "Listen, it's going to be okay," Sharon says, her voice soothing and yet strong, confident and caring all at once. "Do you have any Tylenol or ibuprofen?" He closes his eyes, trying to remember the label on the bottle of painkillers they still have. What kind they are. Red cap, red sticker on the side.
"Yeah, we have Tylenol."
"Try and get him to take a couple," she says calmly, "and make sure he drinks a lot of fluids. If you're really worried about how warm he is, get him into a cool bath, but not cold. You don't want to put him into shock. Just enough to help his body fight it."
"Okay,"
Bucky says, swallowing again, feeling ashamed and grateful all at once.
"Thanks, Sharon."
"Of course, darling, don't you worry. He'll be just fine. And listen here, if you need us, you call, you hear me? If you need to take him somewhere, I know Frank will be there in his truck in a heartbeat. He adores that boy." "So do I," Bucky almost says, hating this oppressively awful, helpless feeling.
"Thank you,"
he says instead, not knowing what else to say. "Go take care of your baby," Sharon gently replies, "and call if you need to."
"I will,"
Bucky promises, and then they say their goodbyes, leaving him once again alone, just him and his sick, unconscious kid. He stands, his body feeling 100 pounds heavier from the stress and the worry, and forces himself to grab a glass of orange juice from the fridge and the bottle of Tylenol from the bathroom. Their breakfast is cold, but Bucky doubts Peter would be up for eating anyway. so he doesn't bother bringing the boy's plate over to him with the drink and the painkillers. Peter is still out cold, body practically steaming from how hot his skin is to the touch, and it's another short eternity before Bucky is able to wake him completely. Peter is still out cold, body practically steaming from how hot his skin is to the touch, and it's another short eternity before Bucky is able to wake him enough to sit up and try and take the Tylenol.
Peter, come on. Just take this and you can go back to sleep, okay?
He says, holding the glass for Peter with one hand and cupping the boy's weak fist, holding the 2 small pills in the other, trying to urge him to lift them to his wobbly head.
Just take them. They'll make you feel better.
Peter slowly lifts his hand to his mouth, completely out of it, his eyes dull like he isn't aware of anything at all around him. He sets the pills on his tongue and sips from the glass when Bucky raises it for him, swallowing with a broken, pained groan. He collapses back against the armrest, eyes closing immediately, as if just sitting up for those 2 minutes took all of his energy. Anxiety continues to flood Bucky as he sets the orange juice and the pill bottle on top of the bar stool beside the love seat within reach, and then begins cleaning up from their uneaten breakfast, his own appetite completely gone. He's in the middle of washing the dishes when Peter abruptly gasps, loud and agonized, and Bucky turns around just in time to see the kid lurch off the couch and bolt for the bathroom. The bar stool is knocked out of the way in Peter's haste, sending the glass and the painkillers flying as it is. Bucky watches as broken glass and orange juice pool across their apartment floor as Peter's sobbing, heaving sounds of throwing up echo from the bathroom. Bucky has to untape the newspapers on the window so he can open it and let the fresh, cool outside air into the apartment, still damp from the rain. Peter whines miserably as the air hits him, reaching desperately for his sleeping bag as Bucky takes it away.
Peter, I told you, you're way too hot for this right now. We need to cool you and this whole place down. Just bear with it, okay?
Can't! Peter sobs, curling up as tight as he can when he realizes Bucky won't hand him his sleeping bag back. Please, I'm so cold! Bucky merely shushes him, running a cool wet cloth over his forehead, despite Peter weakly thrashing to escape from it. He soothingly rubs the kid's back after, not knowing what else to do, as he sits next to the love seat on the floor, and Peter shifts his entire curled-up, shivering form closer to him and presses against Bucky's side, seeking warmth. With a small sigh, Bucky relents and leans further against the couch, letting Peter curl up against him, tears leaking from the kid's tightly shut eyes as he trembles from the cold and the pain. Helplessness consumes Bucky as he sits there, gently patting the boy's back, petting his hair, one arm over him as Peter curls up beneath his arm and presses his fevered body into Bucky's ribs.
Are you hungry?
He quietly asks, but Peter shakes his head, just one quick aborted nod. Frowning, Bucky turns and eyes the bottle of Tylenol beside him, nearly empty now. Peter not able to keep a single pill down, not even just plain water. Sharon's advice of getting the kid into a cool bath comes to mind, but apprehension stops him. Peter's already suffering so much from how cold he feels now, cuddled up against Bucky's warm body beside an open window in 80-degree weather. He can't imagine the discomfort he would feel if Bucky forced him into a tub of water that would probably feel like ice to his fevered body. He files that option away as a last resort, right behind leaving Peter home alone so he can run out and buy some more medicine and a thermometer so he can see exactly what it is he's up against here. But that option is also not ideal because for the few minutes Peter has been awake every few hours all day long, he's not exactly been coherent enough for Bucky to explain where he'd be going and why. And besides, the kid is utterly helpless, not to mention defenseless. Bucky can't leave him alone unless he absolutely has to. Sighing again, Bucky allows himself to pull Peter's sleeping body a little more firmly against his side, eyes closing as he holds the boy there, wishing he had some way to ease his pain. A distant, angry part of himself, deep down, rages furiously at the unfairness of it all. If they had been regular people, Bucky could have taken him to a hospital or a walk-in clinic or a... Even if only he had been a regular person, he could take Peter right to the Avengers, to Steve, who probably have or know doctors that would be able to help an enhanced kid like Peter. But he's not a regular person, and neither is Peter, and it's unfair, but it's just the two of them fighting against everything, even their own bodies now, and when Peter needs his help, it's up to just him, everything riding on Bucky's shoulders because he is the adult, and this is the responsibility he took on, and he wouldn't give Peter up for anything, but right now, in this moment, Bucky is painfully, acutely aware of just how much weight is on his shoulders. That train of self-pity is derailed violently when Bucky hears the familiar rhythmic creak of the stairs that lead up to their balcony outside. He doesn't recognize the footsteps, but they, both of them, are unmistakably walking up to their front door, one behind the other. Bucky pulls himself to his feet and quickly throws on his jacket, his glove, and his hat, pulling it low, unsure of who could possibly be coming to their apartment. He's hesitant to open the door when there's a quiet yet firm knock, especially with Peter in this state. If this is an ambush or an attack, they're screwed. Peter can't even stand up like this. But Bucky has no way of knowing who might be on the other side, so squaring his shoulders, he tempts fate and opens the door. And goes totally numb with surprise and shock when he sees Frank and Sharon standing there, hands full of shopping bags, which is eerily familiar, both looking grim and serious, though Sharon smiles sweetly at him when he meets her eyes.
"Oh, your boy was sick,"
Frank says, while Bucky still struggles to find the words. Any words. "We thought we'd bring you a few things," Sharon adds, motioning to the bags she's holding. "Don't take this the wrong way, Jim, darling, but it sounded like you could use a little help on the phone this morning, and poor Frank was fretting all day." Frank gives his wife a surly look, then glances over Bucky's shoulder, no doubt spying Peter on the love seat across the room.
"Doesn't look like he's feeling any better,"
the man remarks gravely. That does the trick of snapping Bucky out of his stupor, and he looks between the couple confusedly at his starters.
He hasn't been able to keep any of the medicine down."
"Oh, no!" Sharon exclaims, her face breaking into a worried frown as she tries to crane her neck to see into the apartment. "Let's see if we can't get the sweet thing all fixed up, shall we?"
"Where we?"
Frank asks, gesturing to the door, and Bucky gives a quick short nod as he steps inside, letting them enter. It feels weird and deeply foreign to have them here in their home, completely different from seeing them at work, but oddly he's not so much nervous as he is grateful. Grateful that he isn't completely alone in this, that someone else cares about Peter like he does, at least a little. Sharon sets the bags on the counter and then immediately goes to kneel by Peter on the love seat, feeling his face with her hands, which makes Peter gasp and flinch away from the cold feeling, her face scrunching with worry as he does. Frank glances around the still mostly barren room, polite enough not to voice the opinion that he's showing very clearly on his face. "Jim, there's a thermometer in one of the bags on the counter. Would you grab it, please?" Sharon asks, and Bucky is quick to open the bags, finding the thermometer nestled in amongst all sorts of other things. Gatorade, cans of soup, cuts of Jell-O, something called NyQuil, more Tylenol, cough drops, a hot water bottle, a bottle of orange juice, more crap than Bucky ever would have even considered to grab if he'd gone to the store himself. He brings the thermometer over to the woman, clearing his throat as he says, "You guys really went overboard, but thanks. I really appreciate it." Frank regards him quietly for a moment, then says,
"We had a daughter young, and she was a real healthy kid. Hardly even had a cold till she was 4. Then one day, out of nowhere, BAM! She's down for 2 whole weeks with the flu. We were scared shitless, I'll never forget it. Couldn't sleep at all the whole time, worried she was gonna choke in her sleep or have a seizure from how high her fever was. As a father, I'll never forget how helpless I felt back then, and we..." He gestures to Sharon, then back to himself. "We had each other, and my parents, and Sharon's sister. We had people to help us get through it, and I don't know where we'd be if we didn't, because we were young and stupid and had no idea what to do. So consider this my paying it forward, Barnes. One father to another." Bucky opens his mouth to thank the man again, when a quiet, incessant beeping has him turning his attention back on Sharon, who is staring down at the thermometer in her hands with wide, panicked eyes. She quickly darts her head to look up at Bucky and says, "We need to get into a hospital." "Why?"
Bucky asks, feeling panic light up like fireworks inside his guts.
"What does it say?" "How hard is it?"
asks Frank as he steps closer to the left seat, his expression darkening slightly as he glances at Peter's delirious, sweat-soaked face. "It's 108, says Sharon, her lips tightening into a distraught frown. "Jim, that's high enough to cause brain damage. He needs medical attention." His jaw tightens as he grits his teeth, feeling his middle arm vibrate slightly from how hard he clenches his fist. He can't take Peter to a hospital, even if he could afford to. That's just not an option without Peter ending up being taken away at best, and Bucky being found at worst.
"Have you tried getting him into a bath?"
Frank asks, gazing at Bucky and seemingly picking up on his apprehension. Bucky shakes his head, not taking his eyes off Peter's sweltering, shivering form.
He's been fighting me every step of the way, says he feels cold. I didn't want to try that unless I had no other option.
Well, your only other option is putting him in my truck so we can take him to the emergency room,
Frank tells him in a tone that's compassionate while also leaving no room for argument.
You gotta make a choice here, Jim. He's in bad shape.
Nodding slightly, Bucky glances between Peter and the foreboding tub in the bathroom behind him, dreading this, but knowing it's truly the only choice he has now.
We'll give it a try.
Sharon stands and heads into the bathroom, giving Bucky a warm hand on the shoulder as she says, "Outline it so you can feel how cool it needs to be, alright? You might have to do this a few times until it can keep the Tylenol down and his fever breaks."
And once it does, you'll probably have to deal with the reverse problem. He'll feel warm, but you'll want to keep him feeling warmer so that he can sweat out whatever's wrong with him. As long as his fever is low grade, make sure you keep him hot enough so his body gets rid of its toxins. Hot showers that steam up the bathroom are good for that,
Frank adds. Bucky nods along again, listening until Sharon has the tub filled and ready. Bucky dips his hand in, finding the cool temperature actually quite pleasant in their warm apartment, though anxiety fills him again, knowing Peter won't feel the same way. "Jim," Sharon says as he says goodbye to them at the door, "if his fever hasn't gone down by tonight, I want you to promise you will call us, all right? We'll help you get him some help." He nods again, swallowing, steeling his features.
I promise.
Frank nods, clapping him on the shoulder.
If we don't hear from you tonight, you call us tomorrow morning, let us know how he's doing, yeah?
Yeah.
Good man,
Frank says, sparing Peter one final glance as they head out the door.
Go take care of your boy. We'll talk to you soon.
I will.
Bucky says as he watches them leave.
Thanks again.
And then they're gone. Bucky sighs, feeling his insides twist as he shuts the door, just him and Peter again now, and the truly awful experience he's about to put them both through. Peter is practically comatose as Bucky bends down and tries to wake him, feeling his burning forehead with even more trepidation now that he knows just how bad his fever is.
Peter,
he says, whispering without meaning to, catching himself almost speaking too quietly to even wake the boy up.
Come on, kiddo. You need to get up. We gotta get you into the bath.
Peter groans as Bucky sits him upright, his eyes hardly opening, as he allows himself to be pulled up, Bucky intending on helping him walk to the bathroom, but the boy's legs give out, no strength in them at all. So Bucky bends down and lifts Peter into his arms, carrying him the rest of the way without protest, as if Peter fell back asleep the moment he was allowed to be horizontal again. The kid's not able to undress himself, so Bucky helps him out of his clothes and then picks him up again so he can lower Peter into the tub without the kid falling and cracking his head open. What he expects is for Peter to groan and whine and cry as his feverish back hits the cold water. But that's not what happens. What happens is Peter jolts like Bucky laid him on top of a live wire, flinching upward like the water shocked him, and then, with a desperation that completely floors Bucky, Peter shouts and lunges over his shoulder, trying to escape, to jump out of his arms and away from the water.
Hey,
Bucky says, grabbing Peter's clawing hands by his wrists and holding him still in his now-soaked lap, keeping the kid sequestered between him and the tub as Peter shivers violently in the sweltering room.
Kid, relax. I know it won't feel great, but we need to cool you down. It'll suck, but then it will all be over, okay? Just take a deep breath.
No! Peter pleads, voice so stricken with exhaustion and delirium that it's practically a mumble. No, I can't. It's too cold outside.
If we don't bring your fever down, yeah, you will,
he says, hating the words as they come out of his mouth, feeling his chest constrict at the implication of what he just said.
Peter, please, I'm begging you, get in the tub.
I can't! Peter sobs, leaning in against Bucky's chest, half burrowing in his damp jacket, his whole body racked with trembles. Closing his eyes and tipping his head back, feeling his small, sick child shake fiercely in his arms, Bucky forces himself to take a deep breath, steels himself, and then lowers Peter into the tub again, pinning the boy's arms to his chest as he presses down on his shoulders, submerging him up to his neck. Peter lets out a deafening, heartbreaking wail as the cool water envelops him, tears immediately leaking down his flushed face as he tries to twist his body, kicking his legs out futilely, not strong enough in his weakened state to put up much resistance at all under Bucky's strength.
I'm sorry,
he says, his voice catching on a frustrated sob of his own that seems lodged in his throat, absolutely despising everything about this. The sight of his hands holding Peter down, of Peter's face soaked with tears, the sound of his desperate crying, self-hatred and disgust flood inside of him like someone turned on the tap. Bucky ducks his head, anything to block out the sight of his kid's betrayed face. "You're hurting him," Bucky pleads at himself, viciously, wildly angry, in spite of how hopeless he feels. "Stop it! Anything would be better than this. Handing him over to the government would be better than this. Or to Steve. Anything but this." But Bucky smothers that insidious voice, knowing it's right, but despising every word. "I can't," he thinks, lowering his head fully against the rim of the tub, his hand still keeping Peter's sobbing body pinned in the cold water. "I have to take care of him. He needs me." Uselessness and frustration well up inside of Bucky. It isn't fair, none of it. What is he supposed to do? Peter needs to go to the hospital, and Bucky can't take him. Can't afford a doctor anyway. He can't help the kid, can't do anything except hold his shivering, sobbing body down in a cold tub to try and break his fever. No way to help him without causing him pain. And worse, he has no way of knowing what's wrong with Peter or how this happened. Is Peter even capable of getting a virus with his healing factor? Or is his body burning this hot because his healing factor is trying to fight something? Or worse yet, could this be a result or a symptom of his mutation? Could the radiation be causing this? What would happen to Peter if a doctor found out about it? Never mind that he's been living with him. They would take Peter away. Bucky's cover would be blown, alerting Hydra or Steve or both, and then it would be all over. But isn't that the better option if all Bucky can do is sit here watching his kid suffer? "Oh, I'm sorry," he says again to Peter, who is silent and half-conscious in the tub now, practically comatose, save for the violent shiver still racking his body. "I'm sorry, Peter. I know it hurts. It's almost over." Peter doesn't say anything, most likely too consumed by the mind-numbing fever and agonizingly cold water to even comprehend Bucky's words. Bucky waits until he feels Peter's muscles loosen slightly, still taut with discomfort from the cold, but no longer actively trying to fight him, to ease up on his hold, leaning back and letting go of Peter's arms, his left hand slackening to a gentler, more comforting grasp on the boy's shoulder, helping keep his head upright. "You're doing great, kid," Bucky whispers as he feels the boy's forehead, the side of his neck. He's still hot, disconcertingly so, but the water seems to have taken the bite out of his fever, at least a little. But it doesn't get any better than that, and Bucky can only stand to see the kid like this for so long before he's lifting Peter out of the tub and drying him off. Peter falls back unconscious halfway through, so Bucky dresses him and lays him back down on the love seat, and then sits beside him on the floor, running his hands through Peter's hair, praying and silently fighting back tears as he helplessly watches, powerless and alone. By the time the sun is finished setting, Peter still hasn't woken up once since his bath, still hasn't eaten anything or kept any medicine down, and his fever has spiked back up to 108 3 times, never dropping below 106. Bucky doesn't move from his spot beside the love seat the entire time. He lets Peter curl against his side, unable to bring himself to deny that comfort to the kid, but refuses to close the window or give him back his sleeping bag. Peter shivers constantly in his sleep, made worse by the sheen of sweat that refuses to go away, no matter how many times Bucky runs the cool, damp cloth over his fevered skin. He doesn't call Frank and Sharon. Calling them would be the end of everything, and part of Bucky still has hope that this is just some odd fluke, some normal virus that Peter's body is going to overkill trying to fight, or a weird symptom of the radiation that won't end up being anything more than a mild inconvenience. Bucky has no intention of getting anyone else involved, not as long as he can tend to Peter himself, and the boy's life isn't at risk. But the night creeps by unbearably slowly, and as Bucky sits there in the quiet dark, watching Peter steadily get weaker and weaker, something instinctively desperate inside of him starts to fester. He's struggled with feeling like he has no right to be anywhere near Peter ever since the first night he met the kid, but now, alone in this stuffy apartment, completely helpless to do anything but hope Peter starts feeling better soon, Bucky is almost paralyzed by how much he feels like a failure. He can't do anything for Peter. Maybe no one else could either, but at least a better person would be able to get him looked at, get him some pain relief, if nothing else. All Bucky can do is sit and wait and watch and hope and run his hand through the kid's hair and shush him when the pain makes him cry in his sleep. Bucky resigns himself to doing that all night long. determined to at least be there in case that gives Peter any comfort at all. And finally, in the very early hours of the morning, Peter wakes, or at least his body does.
Hey,
Bucky says quietly, smoothing Peter's bangs out of his face again.
how you feeling, kiddo?
Peter blinks at him, slow and focused. His brown eyes look black in the dark room. He gazes at Bucky through half-lidded eyes, heavy and weary from the fever still, and squints at him like he's trying to recognize his face.
Dad!
Peter whispers, voice rough with disuse, unnatural compared to the high tones of his usual voice. Bucky tries giving him a small smile, feeling his forehead again, noting pleasantly that the boy is no longer shaking.
It's okay, Peter,
he says softly as he feels both sides of his neck with the back of his palm.
I'm right here.
Peter whimpers, tears pooling beneath his dark eyes as he takes a small shuddering breath.
Hey.
Bucky immediately soothes, shushing him again when the kid starts to cry.
Pete, hey, you're all right. You're gonna be just fine.
Dad?
Peter says again, deliriously, looking at Bucky like he can't even see him, his vision completely out of focus.
Don't go. Don't go.
I'm not going anywhere,
he says, somewhat confused, trying to comfort the fevered, crying boy.
I'm not leaving, Peter. I'm staying right here with you until you feel better.
Peter shakes his head, the tears falling faster, flooding down his cheeks.
Don't!
He begged, closing his eyes as the tears continue to fall.
Please, Dad, don't go!
He lifts his small trembling hand, finds the hem of Bucky's shirt, and grabs it with a weak, pale fist, tugging him closer without a shred of strength behind it.
Don't get on the plane!
Bucky pulls back sharply, his breath catching as he watches Peter's eyes slowly open, looking straight at him without seeing him. Peter reaches for him again blindly, whimpering when Bucky pulled away.
Dad, don't go! Don't leave me here!
I'm not leaving you,
Bucky whispers without really hearing it, his head spinning from the realization that Peter's merely having a fever dream, that he's not feeling better at all, probably doesn't even know who Bucky is right now. He gently wraps his arms around the kid, holding him as Peter lays beside him, his body and mind going on autopilot as the frustration and hopelessness crushes him once again.
I love you. I'm not going anywhere.
But Peter's already fallen back asleep, the tears drying on his hot skin, his body no longer shaking as Bucky embraces him in his arms, moving them away from the small cramped love seat and onto the mattress instead. Screw it. If this is the only thing he can do to make Peter feel better, if this is the only thing he has the power to give the kid, then fine! He'll hold him for as long as Peter wants. Fever be screwed! He still isn't able to fall asleep, too wired from checking Peter's temperature, what feels like every 50 minutes, from wiping the kid's face down with his washcloth, checking his breathing, jolting awake with every small movement, thinking the kid is waking or seizing or worse. Bucky reaches his breaking point at sunrise. Peter isn't getting better. His fever won't stay down. He can't keep his eyes open for more than a few minutes at a time, and he still hasn't eaten or drunk anything, much less kept any medicine down. The exhaustion and frayed nerves finally become too much, and Bucky goes to roll over and grab his cell phone, desperate to call someone. Frank, an ambulance. Fuck, he would call Steve at this point if it meant getting his child some help. But when he pulls away from Peter, the boy groans, turns over, and slowly opens his eyes, waking. His brows furrow slightly, and then he looks up at Bucky with his tired but clear eyes, gazing directly at him, seeing him.
Dad?
He mumbles sleepily, his voice still too rough, but much more like himself, softer.
Hey, kid,
Bucky says as he leans down, habitually pressing the back of his hand to the side of Peter's neck.
Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere.
Peter hums sleepily, cuddling into Bucky's pillow, then looks back up at him and tiredly says,
I feel pretty hot,
as a small smile crosses his face.
And I'm really hungry.
A laugh startles its way out of Bucky, and he drops the cell phone instantly without a care, relief crashing over him in the best of ways, making him almost lightheaded from the force of it.
Then let's get some food into you,
he says, smiling helplessly, not caring about the wetness threatening to drip from his eyes down his cheeks, finally not feeling useless for the first time in what feels like the longest day of his entire life.